Coming up on Arirang News, the lawmakers of South Korea's 21st National Assembly convene for the first time, electing a speaker and one deputy speaker. But it's a rocky start, with the main opposition party walking out. A newly approved type of ultra-thin face mask goes on sale online in Korea. More comfortable to wear in the summer, demand was so high it crashed the online store of the mask manufacturer. And the lockdowns in countries around the world have given a boost to South Korea's computer game industry. People entertaining themselves at home have driven a rise in game exports. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The new National Assembly is officially open. Lawmakers have elected five-term Representative Byeong-seug of the ruling Democratic Party as the National Assembly Speaker. Park will serve a two-year term. In his acceptance speech, he promised that the 21st National Assembly will prioritize people's livelihoods and be forward-looking. The ruling party's Kim Sang-hee took one of the two deputy speaker posts, becoming the first female lawmaker to do so. The other deputy post remains vacant because the main opposition United Future Party walked out of the chamber without voting, saying the bipartisan negotiations to convene the session were not yet done. The ruling party, together with lawmakers from other parties, pushed ahead, though, saying that there are numerous bills awaiting review, including the government's third supplementary budget. South Korea reported 39 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday, most of them in Seoul and the surrounding area. All but 5 were local transmissions. Of the new cases, 15 were in Seoul, 13 in Gyeonggi-do province, and 6 in Incheon. Total cases now stand at 11,668. There were no new deaths for the second straight day, leaving the death toll at 273. Nearly 29,000 people are being tested. At Friday's meeting of the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, the Prime Minister said the best vaccine is to practice the guidelines for distancing in daily life. That goes especially, he said, for the Seoul area, because an outbreak here could pose risks for the whole country. Now, Seoul has been hosting a summit for mayors around the world, hosting it virtually, of course, where they're discussing what they can do to stop the pandemic. Today is the summit's last day. Our Choi Jung-yoon got to sit down with the mayor of Seoul, Park Won-soon, whose idea it was to hold the summit to discuss the city's response to COVID-19 and what the post-virus era might look like.
In usually buzzing finance hubs like London, the streets are now empty, and tourists are nowhere to be seen in Milan's plazas. Some of the largest cities around the world went quiet, all due to the COVID-19 lockdowns. But Seoul, the world's fifth largest urban area by population, managed to avoid the same fate. How? The mayor of Seoul says it's all about understanding the city.
Why do you think this city of nearly 10 million has been able to avoid a lockdown, unlike cities of a similar size in other countries?
Our principle is very simple and clear. That is the transparency and speed. And secondly, we had made many kinds of innovations, such as drive-through or walk-through, or in case of Itaewon breakout of COVID-19, the Seoul metropolitan government had decided to carry out the preemptive test.
To hear Seoul's know-how on handling the coronavirus, mayors of major cities worldwide gathered at 2020 CAC Global Summit, an online conference set up to discuss future measures to tackle pandemics.
More than 40 mayors across the world had agreed to establish such permanent city government-based organizations, CAP, City Alliance Against Pandemic. So if we can share the information and wisdom together, we can easily overcome this crisis and epidemic.
Amid the COVID-19 crisis, the importance of local government has been reevaluated. Cities were one step ahead with aggressive testing and tracing, working on the front line to establish triage centers and innovative testing booths.
Municipal government is more closely act with the residents. So it's inevitable, so many innovations and good practices used to come from the local governments.
Mayor Park says civilization faces a great transition with a divide between the pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 eras. Seoul aims to cope with the post-coronavirus era by utilizing the crisis to make advances in the fields of society, economy, and culture. The city plans to build permanent disease research centers as well as epidemiological investigation facilities. It also plans to tackle inequality by ensuring those most vulnerable to the outbreak have income security. 최정윤, 아리랑 뉴스.
A South Korean website selling newly approved ultra-thin masks crashed today as buyers rushed to purchase the masks. The droplet-blocking masks, which are as thin as dental masks, went on sale Friday for about 40 US cents apiece at the online shop of local mask producer Wellkeeps. These masks are much easier to breathe through than KF94 masks and are a third of the weight, so they're more comfortable in hot weather. They're also among the 9 types of masks approved by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety earlier this week. Wellkeeps online store is currently limiting purchases to 30 masks per person to prevent stockpiling. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Friday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, Wall Street was mostly down overnight despite the ECB announcing new stimulus. The market may be looking a bit overbought to some investors. The S&P down by 1/3%. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, because of very strong rally that we've seen in the last week or so, the U.S. market took us some breather yesterday. However, though, continuation of a huge boosting measures that were expected to be announced by various countries are actually pushing the market up even higher. If you look at the futures market for U.S., it's already up about 1% for S&P futures, and NASDAQ futures are up about 0.7%. If you look at the various reports coming out, the Trump administration's officials are increasingly expect to spend up to $1 trillion in the next round of economic stimulus. And in terms of how that will be done, we're not sure. But nevertheless, the messages that delivered by the governments continues to say they will do anything impossible to have economic recovery come through. This kind of the behavior is actually happening not just U.S. but also European market. European governments are all talking about additional boosting measures if necessary. All that is resulting into quite strong rally today. We see that the futures market of U.S. as well as the European market right now, they are all rising by somewhere between 1% to 2%.
Right. Well, here in Korea, the session started out with some uncertainty, but the Kospi ended up gaining more than 1%. What was the story today?
Right. As you said, with the taking some breather of U.S. market, Korean market also started with slightly down as of in the morning. But as the afternoon passed, we saw market rallying. The Kospi was up by 1.43% again, almost nearing to 1280 range. Now, Kosdaq also up to about 750, which is up by another 0.93%. Clearly, we are seeing continuation of liquidity-driven rally in the Korean market. Today, the major leader for that is institutional money. The Korean institutions were buying Korean equity quite aggressively in terms of the Kospi. As for the Kosdaq, we saw foreign investors buying quite significant amount to push up the market index quite higher. Clearly, we think that the level of the cash position, level of the liquidity condition in the market is quite ample enough to show further rise of the Korean equity market, at least in the short term.
Well, we see oil continuing to rise now to the $37 range. West Texas Intermediate and OPEC and its allies largely sticking to the production cuts they agreed to, but there's uncertainty about whether those cuts will be extended. Tell us about what's happening in oil and your outlook.
Sure. I've been saying that the oil prices should be quite resilient, but nevertheless, it would be a range bound between $30 to $40. When the oil price crashed to negative territories about a month ago, we were saying that with the production cut and also the relative demand measures remaining, we thought that the oil price should be remaining somewhere between $30 to $40. However, though, oil price breaking above $40 might be difficult because of the current situation where the demand for oil, particularly from the gasoline-driven cars, would probably much weaker demand going forward as the electric cars will be taking quite a big part of the market share in the future. All being said, we think that the oil price in a short term, though, will show quite a bit of a rise to probably close to $40. Right now, it is hitting about $37.8 for the WTI. The reason for that is because most of the economies are reopening, and most of the people are anticipating with all these boosting measures, economic recovery should come through latest in the third quarter this year. And if that's the case, then the oil demand should be normalizing in the future, and that should result into fairly reasonable prices around $40 that range.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. You too.
Now, the lockdowns in many countries have driven a boost in sales of computer games as people look for ways to keep themselves entertained. For Korea's game industry, this has led to a significant rise in exports, as our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
Who's playing computer games these days? Lots of people, it seems. As analytic firms say, there was a worldwide spike in mobile game downloads during the first 3 months of this year, with mobile games downloaded 12.3 billion times, an 18% increase on year. Korean games companies, which have expanded aggressively in the global market over the past few years, are reaping the rewards of this trend.
The Korean game industry's total exports amounted to $6.4 billion in 2018. That's more than twice what it was in 2014.
One of country's major online game publishers, Nexon, saw around $2 billion of sales last year, with more than 60% of that coming from outside of Korea. Nexon's most popular game globally is Dungeon & Fighter, a 2D action game that has been leading global market sales for more than 10 years. Mobile game Cartrider Rush Plus has also been released overseas recently, gaining popularity in Taiwan.
This summer, we are to release mobile version of Dungeon & Fighter in China. We're also getting ready to release Cartrider Drift globally within this year, which enables cross-play between consoles and PCs for the first time in this country.
Game publisher NCSoft has also been releasing its games in around 60 countries around the world.
The most popular game in the global market is the Guild Wars franchise, released in 2005. It sold more than 7 million copies, and its sequel, Guild Wars 2, had more than 11 million user accounts.
NCSoft says it will continue to expand into Europe and North America, for example, by releasing an interactive music game, Fuser, in the second half of the year. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
People who want to teach sports and activities like mountain biking and skiing can now get a new kind of certification from South Korea's National Forest Service. This is for people already certified by the state as sports instructors who have experience in those activities and others like hang gliding, skiing, and horseback riding. To get the certification, they just have to take a course. The Forest Service hopes this will help people get expert guidance in these sports and provide more opportunities to young professionals. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.